Picture this. You skip the gym one day. No big deal. You order takeout instead of cooking. No big deal. You buy the coffee instead of making it at home. No big deal. Individually, none of these decisions matter. That's exactly why nobody notices what they're actually doing. Here's the thing nobody tells you about money. It's not the big decisions that build or destroy wealth. It's not the car you buy or the house you rent. It's the hundreds of tiny, invisible decisions you make every single day that nobody, including you, is tracking. And they compound, quietly, relentlessly, in one direction or the other. Today, I want to show you something called the 1% rule. And once you actually understand how it works, you'll start noticing it everywhere in your financial life. My name's Jordan. If you've ever felt like your money situation is the result of one big mistake, stick around, because it's usually not. Hit subscribe if this kind of thing is useful to you. All right, let's talk about the 1% rule. The idea is simple. If you get 1% better or 1% worse at something every day, the results after a year are not small. They're massive. Improve by 1% daily, and by the end of the year, you're not 365% better. You're roughly 37 times better because the improvements compound on top of each other. And the reverse is true too. Decline by 1% a day, and by the end of the year, you're not just a little worse off. You're nearly at zero. Most people assume financial change requires a dramatic moment, a pay raise, a windfall, a crash diet for your bank account. But that's not how wealth actually gets built or destroyed. It happens in 1% increments that are almost impossible to notice in the moment. Let's make this concrete. Say you spend an extra $5 a day on small convenience purchases. Coffee, snacks, delivery fees, subscriptions you forgot about. $5 doesn't feel like anything. It's less than most people spend on lunch. But $5 a day is $150 a month. That's $1,800 a year. Invested at 8% annually over 20 years, that becomes roughly $89,000. Now, flip it. Save that same $5 a day instead. Same math, same $89,000. The only difference is the direction of the decision. Here's where it gets really interesting. Your brain doesn't register either of these as significant. Not the $5 you saved, not the $5 you spent, because $5 feels emotionally neutral. It's below your mental threshold for something worth thinking about. And that's exactly the problem. The decisions that shape your financial future are specifically designed, by nature of being small, to avoid your attention. Think about it like erosion. A single wave doesn't reshape a coastline. You could watch the ocean for an hour and see absolutely nothing change. But over years, that same tiny, repeated motion carves through rock. Not because any one wave was powerful, because none of them ever stopped. Your daily money decisions work exactly the same way. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Jordan, so what do I actually do with this? Here's the practical version. You don't need to overhaul your entire financial life. You need to identify your personal 1% moves, the small, repeatable decisions that are quietly compounding in one direction. Start with this question. What's one small financial habit you do almost every single day without thinking about it? For some people, it's a daily delivery order. For others, it's a subscription they forgot to cancel. For others, it's simply not checking their account balance because it feels uncomfortable. These aren't character flaws. They're just default settings that nobody ever went back and adjusted. Once you identify one, the fix is almost never dramatic. You don't need to cut it out completely. You need to shift it by roughly 1%. Order delivery 3 times a week instead of 5. Move $20 a week into savings instead of 0. Check your balance once a week instead of avoiding it entirely. Small enough that it doesn't feel like sacrifice, consistent enough that it compounds. And here's the part that actually changed how I think about this.
The 1% rule doesn't care whether you notice it working. It runs in the background either way. The only choice you actually have is which direction it's running in.
Most people think building wealth requires motivation. It doesn't. It requires one small adjusted default that you don't have to think about again. Because willpower shows up occasionally. Systems show up every single day, whether you're paying attention or not. So here's your starting point. Pick one daily decision. Just one. Something small enough that changing it barely registers. Adjust it by roughly 1%. Then let it run for 30 days without judging it, tracking it obsessively, or expecting to feel different immediately. Because you won't feel different immediately. That's the whole point. The wave doesn't reshape the coastline in a day. But it does reshape it eventually.
If this helped you see your daily habits differently, hit subscribe. And I want to know, what's one small daily decision you think might be quietly compounding in your life right now? Drop it in the comments. Sometimes just naming it is the first step to flipping the direction it's running in.